right. So my aim in this paper is to approach the actor's body in an intermedial perspective. In order to do this, I'm going to focus on Holy Motors, a film directed by L.Carax, which reflects on the nature of film performance. The French filmmaker explores the relationship between the actor's body and film technology in a historicist perspective. It shows the aesthetic continuity between the technology of motion capture used in digital cinema and the pre-cinematic device of chronophotography developed by Etienne Jules Marais and Edward Muybridge in the second half of the 19th century. Commenting on his film, L.Carax argued that motion capture, a device which makes it possible to record human movements via sensors placed on a body and to transport them in a virtual world, in 3D for example, follows on from Muybridge and Marais' chronophotographic works a century and a half later. By expanding on this argument, I will analyze how the mise-en-scène of Holy Motors makes such a continuity between motion capture and chronophotography visible. Due to its fragmented and baroque narrative which interweaves many different storylines, Holy Motors proved difficult to summarize. Played by the actor Denis Lavant, the main character is named Mr. Oscar, Monsieur Oscar. We follow his one-day journey through Paris on board a white limousine driven by his assistant and chauffeur, Céline. Like an actor, Mr. Oscar performs multiple characters and has no stable identity. Every time the limousine stops, a new narrative starts and Mr. Oscar performs a new character, such as a businessman, a father, a dying old man, or a hitman. He embodies 11 characters in total. Mr. Oscar uses the interior space of the limousine as a dressing room. He makes himself up, changes costumes and wigs, and even skins. Although each sequence seems to walk autonomously, Holy Motors is not an anthology film. By showing how the character metamorphoses from one sequence to another, Carax weaves links between the different episodes of the film. As the actor Denis Lavant argues, Holy Motors is not an anthology film because we often see the character in the limousine in between two states while he's molding a new face. Everything lies in the transitions. This last sentence, everything lies in the transitions, is revealing of the inner workings of the film. The transition shows intermediary states and forges links and connection between different and sometimes heterogeneous elements. The transitory moments in the limousine, when Oscar changes mask and skin, establish a sense of continuity within the discontinuous and fragmented narrative of the film. Also, the sequences are heterogeneous. The trajectory of the limousine inscribes the film in a continuous movement which gives the narrative its cohesion. Furthermore, a transition designates the process of changing from one condition or state to another. Carax highlights the process of transformation between heterogeneous sequences, body images, identities, narratives, and media. Mr. Oscar's successive mutations mirror the media mutations of the film. By referring to both old and new digital technologies, such as chronophotography and motion capture, the filmmaker explores how the actor's body is transformed through contact with film technology. According to Yvonne Spillman, the category of transformation is essential to intermedia. She describes intermedial cinema as the result of processes of transformation effected through convergence of elements of different media. I'm going to demonstrate how L.Carax shows such a process of transformation by highlighting the transition and the passage between chronophotography and motion capture within the cinematic image. As Agnes Petro Puts it, intermediality appears as a border zone across which media transgression takes place, or an unstable place of in-between, a passageway from one media towards another. In Holy Motors, the cinematic image can be viewed as a liminal zone where circulates diverse media. To be more specific, the actor's gestures in their interaction with film technology shift and transgress the borders between media and art. In order to demonstrate this, it is necessary to analyze the media relations between chronophotography and motion capture. In the opening credits of Holy Motors, Carax showed the pictures of a man who runs. These images were shot by the pioneer Etienne Jules Marais in the late 19th century. Developed by Marais and Muybridge, chronophotography is a prismatic device that makes it possible to break down the trajectory of a human or animal gesture into a series of frames. As a result, chronophotography enables the human eye to scrutinize the mechanics of gesture in detail. The process tends to emphasize the mechanical nature of the body in a socio-cultural context in which industrialism occupies a predominant position. Marais' chronophotographic sequences included in Holy Motors are all animated. As a result, the static nature of the photographic medium mutates through contact with the technology of moving images. So this sequence is animated. I don't know if it works. It doesn't seem to work. Okay, a few technical issues here. I wanted to show a sequence, but it doesn't seem to work, so I'm sorry about that. Okay, no problem. All right, basically, what the picture I just shown here are animated by L.Carax, and they are losing the fixity of the staticity of the photographic medium. So the frozen body of the man who runs becomes fluid and dynamic. The speed of his gestures proves too fast to be properly analyzed in a scientific manner. In this sense, Carax reappropriates chronophotography in a cinematic perspective by re-establishing the movement of the gestures. In a similar way, Carax also showed the continuity between the cinematic art and the digital technology of motion capture, which is used in numerous artistic, scientific, and even military applications. As Matt Delbridge explains, motion capture describes the process of digitally recording movement in 360 degrees and translating that movement onto a model in projected or screen-based 3D space. A performer wears a special suit equipped with sensors. When the sensors are connected to the computer system, the performer's movements animate a 3D model. The physical space is thus translated into a virtual space. According to Delbridge, motion capture generates an intermediate form which interweaves different arts such as theater, film, and animation. Carax uses the process of motion capture in the third episode of the narrative. Playing the role of a motion capture performer, Mr. Oscar enters a studio located on the top floor of a factory. The sequence is constituted of 3 scenes. In the first scene, the sensors of the character's suit are connected to the motion capture system. The character performs several series of acrobatic gestures which evoke techniques of martial arts. Secondly, the character runs on a treadmill while shooting with a gun. Behind him, a big screen shows an abstract grid of figures and geometrical shapes which are digitally generated by a computer. Finally, a female character enters the studio. Both characters perform an erotic choreography in motion capture. The last shot of the sequence shows the digital transposition of the movement onto the big screen. The gestures animate 2 monsters called Cyber Creatures by L.Carax, which are having a sexual intercourse. I wanted to show you this moment, but I'm not sure, I don't think it's going to work. So I've completely misunderstood how we could include videos in a PowerPoint. To click, you think? No. But basically, at the end of the sequence, you see what is interesting is that you see the performers in the studio, the actual performance of the actors in the studio, and there is this movement of camera from the physical space toward the virtual space. So there is this movement of camera shows this, that the thematic image here works as a kind of an intermediary between the physical and the virtual spaces. All right. So this sequence is interesting for different reasons. First of all, Carax chooses to show the digital representation in motion capture only in the last 30 seconds of the sequence, while the sequence lasts 9 minutes in total. So rather than showing the virtual representation of the character's movements, he films mostly the actual performance in the physical space of the studio. Secondly, the studio resembles a black box, or as we say in French, a salle obscure. The expression black box designates the traditional space of the movie theater. Okay. It is worth noting that in the opening sequence of Holy Motors, L.Carax shows himself penetrating the space of a movie theater. The filmmaker seems to suggest an analogy between the traditional dispositif of thematic projection and the device of motion capture. In both cases, the representation of an actual movement is transposed onto a big screen. The physical reality of the real world is turned into a moving image. Thirdly, the black box is located in a factory which serves as a metaphor for the contemporary film industry. Carax compares the sequence in motion capture to modern times, in which Chaplin plays a worker having trouble manipulating industrial machines. He says, "I see the character like Chaplin in modern times, who plays a factory worker trapped in the cogs of big industrial machines, except that the machines and motors have disappeared. The character in Holy Motors struggles alone in virtual gears." The comparison with modern times is indicative of what Carax tries to highlight in this sequence. He aims to show the interaction between the film actor and the thematic machine. This interplay is essential to understand the nature of film performance. In his famous essay, The Work of Art in the Age of Its Reproducibility, Walter Benjamin defines the craft of film performance by considering the relationship between the film actor and the camera. The mechanical apparatus turns the actor's performance into a moving image. Benjamin's argument consists in demonstrating how the intermediary position of the camera between the audience and the actor results in a loss of aura, as we have seen previously. Benjamin compares film performance to a mechanized test or an aptitude test. The actor's performance is scrutinized by the camera and examined by a group of specialists, including the filmmaker and the operator. In Carax's film, no camera and no film crew are visible. In the studio, the male character interacts with a computer system which gives instructions and sometimes comments on his performance. However, the absence of camera is illusory. Instead of exploring the virtual possibilities offered by motion capture, Carax uses traditional techniques of filmmaking to shoot the sequence. Indeed, the filmmaker uses striking stylistic effect to reveal that the actor's performance is actually filmed by a camera. The camera moves to follow the character's movements. Carax uses the process of slow motion to highlight the precision of his gestures. The cuts of the editing intensify the speed of the gestures. finally, sound effects amplify the physical contact between the actor and his environment. Similarly to Chaplin in modern times, the performer is subjected to the power of the industrial machine which he cannot control. Throughout the sequence, the character's body is tested. While running on the treadmill, the character falls on the ground, unable to follow the mechanical rhythm of the machine which dictates the rhythm of his movement. In the last part of my presentation, I'm going to attempt to show how the mise-en-scène of this sequence refers to Marais' aesthetics of chronophotography while using the technology of motion capture. By not showing the virtual representation of the character's gestures, but by filming the actor's actual performance, Carax uses the cinematic medium to explore a border zone between chronophotography and motion capture. First of all, the notion of performance test developed by Benjamin lies at the core of Marais' chronophotographic experiments. When Carax films his character running on the treadmill, he replicates Marais' style of framing, which enables the spectator to see the entirety of the actor's body. However, Carax modifies this style of framing by causing the camera to move. Indeed, the camera gradually approaches the character as well as the virtual backdrop, which is digitally generated by a computer. Through framing and movement, Carax forges the links between chronophotography and digital technologies. Secondly, when Carax uses the device of slow motion, he highlights the gestural flow of the character's performance in a way which is reminiscent of certain chronophotographic plates. On this point, it is interesting to say that Jean-Luc Godard and Anne-Marie Miéville in the television series France Tour Détour deux Enfants made in 1977 also used the process of slow motion and the medium of video to revive the device of chronophotography. Some critics like Alain Bergala have underlined Godard's influence on Holy Motors. Finally, the black suit, which covers the performer's body, becomes almost invisible in the darkness of the studio. The character's gestures become abstract. If we vaguely distinguish the shape of the performer's body, we essentially see the movement of the luminous sensors on his suit. Marais often asked his subjects to wear a black suit in order to dissimulate the bodies. Luminous dots were attached to the black velvet suit. As we can see in these pictures, only white lines and dots are made visible by the camera. The movement of the body is translated in geometric forms. It is not coincidental if Carax draws on Marais' process. At the end of the sequence, the choreographed gesture of the male and female performers take the form of an abstract constellation of dots, which directly evokes Marais' aesthetics. Then the camera eventually moves from the physical space of the studio toward the screen, which shows the virtual transformation of the performers into monsters through the process of motion capture. In conclusion, the media hybridity of the film generates a hybrid aesthetics embodied by hybrid characters who exist in between life and technology, in between the real and the virtual, and in between the organic and the mechanical. The aesthetic and technological continuity between chronophotography and motion capture manifests through the performer's gestures in a sensual and mysterious way. Here, I would like to highlight the role of gesture in relation to intermediality. In interaction with the audiovisual technologies of moving image, gestures interconnect different media as well as different arts such as 3D animation, chronophotography, abstract art, martial arts, and dance. The performance gestures reveal the continuity and link between these different artistic practices. Indeed, a gesture is a moving, transitory, and fluent form of life which transgresses fixed borders, shows the passage from one media to another, and forges the links between old and new technologies. In the middle of the film, an old man played by Michel Piccoli, asks Mr. Oscar why he continues to do this job. Mr. Oscar answered that he continues for the same reason that he started in the first place. He argued that he performs for the beauty of gesture, la beauté du geste. As I try to demonstrate in this paper, the cinematic beauty of gestures in holy motors creates an aesthetic continuum between 19th century pre-cinematic inventions and the most advanced digital technologies. Thank you.